1-week season.
OWS fam, the nation, my dudes and dudettes, we are back. This is Searching for Ceiling, presented by 1 Week Season, Sharp Football Analysis, and Mötley Crüe, apparently. Just kidding, it's not. We have no affiliation with Mötley Crüe. That is me digging myself, because apparently there's a drinking game of the show. Who knew? Drinking game of the show, every time Hilow says, shout. That's where we're at. This is week 7, and you know this is Hribar. How we doing today, dude?
Doing real good, man. Listen, we got a little Mötley Crüe going. We're doing well, man.
Let's go, man. So you got to get the Mötley Crüe up in here. You got to get the shouts. I will do my best. But here we are, man. Let us get into the slate. Before we begin, though, there's one spot on the slate that sticks out like a sore thumb. We have Justin Jefferson against the man-heavy Detroit Lions. We're going to talk about that real quick, but before we do, let's look at some splits for Justin Jefferson against man coverage this season. My man, Justin Jefferson, 6.05 yards per route run against man coverage, 1.12 fantasy points per route run. He has almost a 50% first read target rate against man coverage. And of course, the Lions are in man coverage at a 38.5% rate this season. That is fourth. Have you seen that game this week? Getting some. Is it not? Can you hear me?
Dude, all you can hear is the Mötley Crüe, man.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
It was still going. That's so dope. So dope. Oh my God. Sick. Well, this is live television, y'all. I forgot to turn the Mötley Crüe off. This is.
I was like,
this is Searching for Ceiling, presented by 1 Week Season, Sharp Football Analysis, and Mötley Crüe, y'all. Sorry. Apparently, there is a drinking game. I tried to set this up and completely failed. Apparently, there is a drinking game of this show. Anytime I say shout, you take a drink. So I will do everything in my power to give you some shouts to drink. Yes, we'll get Led Zeppelin. We'll get Led Zeppelin in next
time. You guys
time.
might be, listen, JM might have to pay out some royalties.
Dude, that is so funny. That is awesome. Well, Mötley Crüe, man, that is the theme of this week. We are going to shout to the top of the leaderboard. Let us begin. I was just going on a little rant about how dope this, there's a setup for one particular player, one particular team. I want to lead with that now that we are back and now that we're started and now that we don't have Mötley Crüe going. Mr. Justin Jefferson, dude. Mr. Justin Jefferson gets a matchup against the Detroit Lions, who are in man coverage at a 38.5% frequency. Listen real quick to some of Justin Jefferson's splits against man. 48.3% first read target share, 6.05 yards per route run, 1.12 fantasy points per route run against man coverage this season. How are you seeing this spot, dude?
Yeah, I mean, it's an amazing spot. Interesting enough is that Aaron Glenn actually didn't play a lot of man coverage in this matchup last year in either matchup, and it didn't matter. He only played man coverage 19.8% of time in the 2 games against the Vikings last year. And when they went to more shell coverage, Justin Jefferson still caught 14 of 18 targets for 245 yards and a touchdown against zone coverage as well in those matchups. This is an exciting spot for Justin Jefferson for a few reasons. One is the fact that we're probably going to get a full passing script for the Vikings. At least we assume so. We haven't had one yet. Sam Darnold is only averaging 14.6 dropbacks per game in the second half this season because they are number 1 in the NFL in point differential in the first half this season. They are favorites here, but only 1.5 point favorites. We don't believe they're going to be able to run the football well in this game, even if they are playing ahead. So it should be our first full Justin Jefferson passing script. He only has 16 targets in the second half this entire season.
Yeah.
And when you look at the Detroit Lions, I mean, they are not only their pass funnel, but they funnel points to wide receivers. 64% of the fantasy points they've allowed have gone to wide receivers. It's the highest rate in the league. Interesting enough, the team that's 31st on the other side of this game. So it's a really fun game that could be have a lot more passing than you believe based on like what the volume that these two quarterbacks have had to this point this season.
100%. And you look at what these defenses are doing to opposing offenses. These two teams are in the top 4 in pass rate over expectation forced or allowed, or however you want to conceptualize that. So they are forcing other teams to pass. We know that both of these defensive lines are allowing some of the fewest yards before contact in the league. So yeah, this is a spot where I don't know if the field is fully going to get here, but I'm loving this Minnesota passing attack. Are you kind of singling out Justin Jefferson? Are you bringing along Darnold? How are you handling the Detroit side of this?
I mean, my first instinct is that always kind of a quarterback that doesn't run, be a little bit cautious. But this slate actually has a lot of the mobile quarterbacks kind of removed from it. So
Yeah.
we still have Jaden Daniels and Jalen Hurts up here, but it is more of a non-Konami code kind of slate this week. And then we have to factor in too, this is the first game post Aiden Hutchinson, who literally at one point we did a show and we talked about him just teleporting to the backfield this season. He was leading the NFL in pressures. He had 10 more than the next closest player. He had generated pressure on 25% of his snaps as a pass rusher. I mean, highest rate in the league for a guy that has rushed the passer as many times as he has. And the Lions, like defensive splits when they've gotten pressure versus when they haven't, are dramatically different. When they have pressured the opposing quarterback, those quarterbacks have a 49% completion rate, 5 yards per pass attempt, and a first down or touchdown on 26% of those passes. When they haven't gotten pressure on the opposing quarterback, those rates go up to 72% completion rate. That's 18th in the NFL, 7.3 yards per pass attempt. That's 15th, and a first down or touchdown on 36% of those passes, which is 20th. So it does open up an avenue here for a lot of people to kind of maybe wash the taste out of their mouths that maybe Dak Prescott and the Cowboys left against this Lions passing game last week in this matchup.
And you mentioned the splits with Aiden Hutchinson getting pressure and not, and the team. Aiden Hutchinson was responsible for 7.5 of the 15 sacks from the Lions this season. Like, this is a big loss for this team. Do they send more blitzes? They hadn't been blitzing at an extreme rate. Do they up that now without Aiden Hutchinson? Which could, again, if they're playing man behind a blitz, I mean, this just screams Justin Jefferson this week. I haven't looked at ownership projections, but I don't think he's going to be overly owned because we're still in this meta of DFS on both sites where pricing is super tight. And Justin Jefferson is the most expensive skill position player on the slate. So love this spot. I love the fact, and well, I guess on the other side, we have a Minnesota defense that has very, very strong tendencies as well. They were blitzing a ton. They were playing a ton of too high behind. You look at Jared Goff's tendencies, that screams Amon-Ra. So, like, are you able to fit both of them in? Are you? How do you see this playing out? Is this something where we can like get two of the highest priced players like jammed into a roster here?
I've been building kind of lineups around them just to see how it looks and see what we can fit. We record this on Friday afternoons, and typically the last few weeks we've been doing this, something has opened up after we recorded. You know, last week it was kind of like Bucky Irving, right? Like we got official word that like Rachaad White isn't gonna play, and then that like kind of altered how everyone was building their lineups from the time we recorded. We'll see. I don't know if we have one of those spots on the surface like we're waiting on, right? To see if there's like that type of running back that opens up, because Brian Robinson's already been practicing this week. And, you know, like a guy like Ramondre, he plays in the morning on London, so he's not even on the slate. So I don't know if we're going to get that this week, which means we got to get a little bit more creative on the surface. But I do want to try to get to both of these guys if I can. Like you said, I think there's an ancillary piece here too that looks really good. Goff in general is another guy I think that maybe goes overlooked in this slate too, because like Darnold might be a little bit more popular, but we know what Brian Flores is going to do. And Goff is on like an insane heater right now. He started the season kind of slow and he wasn't playing really well the first couple of weeks, but I mean, dude, he's 54 of 66 his past 3 games passing for just over 12 yards per pass attempt. And we've seen because the thing about Goff, everyone has talked about like home, road, indoor, outdoors, and he has some stuff where like dealing with like precipitation has been an issue. If you remember the old draft when he visited the Browns, Pep Hamilton dumping the water on his hands. If you remember. But Goff typically his splits have always been about one thing: pressure. Like he's a quarterback, when you disrupt him, he has issues. And last year, Brian Flores did his thing that he does. He actually blitzed Jared Goff on 73% of the dropbacks in those games, the highest rate Minnesota blitzed any quarterback they faced multiple times. And he was 9 of 23, Goff was, when they got pressure on him. But when the Vikings did not pressure Jared Goff, he was 44 of 49 passing in those games for 10 yards per pass attempt. And if you look at those two games, I mean, Amon-Ra absolutely shredded them. And when you look at the guys that have given Minnesota kind of the most trouble this season from a wide receiver stance, it's been these guys that can play inside, outside. Stephon Diggs, 10 catches. Jaden Reed, 7 for 140. Garrett Wilson, 13 for 100. Like, it's been this archetype of player that has had the bigger games against the Vikings. So I do want to try to get there. I do think one interesting note about this game, if you are running doubles, because I actually think this is a game where you just look at both wide receiver duos, right? Like, I think Jordan Addison and Jameson Williams can come along for the ride. Jameson Williams leads the NFL in yards receiving against the blitz this season, and he leads the Lions in targets against the blitz this season. And initially, your mind probably goes like mine did, to look at these splits and say, all right, so he's the shot play guy when they get man coverage. That's not what the Vikings do when they blitz. They pull out of coverage. They're blitzing DBs basically a lot. Like, their blitzes are coming from exotics. But against zone blitzes, Jameson Williams actually, his target rate goes up to 32% of the team targets, and he leads the NFL in yards against those types of blitzes too. So a very interesting another piece to potentially bring back in doubles in this game as well.
Yes, I love that. I love the Goff doubles with the Justin Jefferson. You mentioned that we don't really have a ton of value, and typically we're looking to the running back position at this time of year with those injuries for value. There is one spot on this slate where it's a kind of a glaring value spot until yesterday, and we got the practice report, and that's Juju Smith-Schuster. JJSS is priced at only 4K on DraftKings. This is a glaring value spot. We saw him kind of in the second half of their Monday Night Football game. What was it? 2 weeks ago. They're coming off their bye. Yeah, 2 weeks ago. Where he kind of took on that Rashee Rice role as far as route structures. In the first half, it was mostly Travis Kelce. And then, honestly, I just think Travis Kelce got gassed. Like, he was legitimately tired. And then we kind of just saw Rashee Rice, or we saw Juju Smith-Schuster kind of step into that role. At only 4K, this is a potential piece. And I say potential because he popped on the injury report on Thursday. He was limited with a hamstring injury. Now, that's not as difficult to overcome as completely being held out with a hamstring injury, but we never want to see a wide receiver hamstring pop up in the middle of the week. So we might get that value play or that potential value play taken out. But that is a very clear spot to me to be able to pay up for some of this more exciting stuff. He's coming off a 7 for 130 game. Some of that was a little fluky. He had a 30+ yard reception that was a little bit fluky over the middle, but still, if he is in that Rashee Rice role, that is kind of how this Kansas City offense is built. So that being said, like, how are you seeing this Kansas City San Francisco game in the afternoon with two of these high-powered offenses, but very, very stingy defenses?
Yeah, it's crazy to think that we would have like a 49ers Chiefs game and kind of not be that excited from a fantasy stance, outside of, like you said, like Juju potentially being 4K on DraftKings is definitely like a player worth putting into that. Like, he's definitely underpriced if he has like the target share he had in week 5. If you go back to just 2 years ago, I mean, this is a guy that had 100 targets with the Chiefs. So like, he is a trustworthy player that in their eyes. And when you look at kind of the ghosts of him and Kareem Hunt kind of coming back to life, I also think that we can probably say some of their struggles last year in 2023 were definitely indicative of their environments as well. Because, Kareem Hunt was not a very good player with the Browns last year, but also the Browns were complete garbage. Like, the offense wasn't that good. It was a lot better looking than it is right now, especially when Joe Flacco played. But, and Juju just was in that quagmire with the Patriots where it just sunk on him. So maybe these guys are not quite as dead as we maybe thought, or as dusty as we may have thought. Because when none of these guys have like a game where they pop, you're like, almost everyone's initial reaction is like, all right, well, that was just kind of fluky, right? But these are guys that have been in this system and they've been trusted before. So I don't think we can completely ignore it either and throw the baby out with the bathwater for Juju's game. Are you going to get a 50-yard catch and run again? Probably not. Probably not. But at 4K, you don't need that. If he has 6 for 65 and a touchdown, or 6 for 75, like, that's a pretty good game at 4K. That's going to open you up to get to the Justin Jefferson in your lineup, the Amon-Ra. We talk about the guys that could have maybe 30 30 points for you. So I'm in on that. The rest of the game here is kind of tough for fantasy football purposes to kind of glom onto. Kind of like the one North Star from like an objective stance you would say is like right now the Chiefs are like still just giving up a ton of points to tight ends. But like we're in kind of also this meta, like paying for tight ends is hard. Like if you like a tight end, because like to me, Brock Bowers should be 7K on DraftKings, and FanDuel has made him expensive. But DraftKings is I believe is still underpricing Brock Bowers. But also even at 5,800, it's hard to get the Brock Bowers from like a lineup construction stance because of how restrictive it is kind of this week without kind of anything opening up. So like when you look at a guy like George Kittle, who's even a little bit a couple hundred more than Brock Bowers, it's hard to kind of jam him in, right, to lineups when we want to play Jefferson. We want to play players at wide receiver that he's past to 30 points, right? So that's what makes it hard. This game is, from a fan stance, it really is weird because you would think we'd be so excited about like the Super Bowl rematch, 49ers Chiefs. And outside of really kind of Juju's price zone, and that's really only on DraftKings because he's on FanDuel, he's 6,100 and it's not full PPR, and you're not that excited about that. So yeah, it feels weird to be like, I'm very much more excited about the other 2 4:00 games than this one.
So let's talk about those real quick. Actually, before we do that, there are 2 other wide receivers that are in this like sub-elite tier that have clear paths to 30 plus fantasy points, like you're alluding to. Malik Neighbors returns from a concussion. He's priced at 7,500 on DraftKings. And then we have Tyreek Hill. And I want to talk about Tyreek real quick before we get into those 2 other afternoon games. If I were to draw up a situation and an opponent for Mike McDaniel to figure it the F out, like it would be coming off of a bye with 2 weeks to prepare for a static defense like Gus Bradley's Colts. So this is like the most perfect setup you will ever see. And this is kind of like, this is the test. This is the final test for Mike McDaniel, whether we start talking about him as a fake sharp or like a legitimate, like sharp coach in the NFL. The way that his season has started, obviously he has had to, go assholes and elbows after losing his quarterback again to his 3rd concussion. Tua is expected to come back this season, but he's got to figure something out in the meantime or his season is toast. And what's most interesting about this is the Dolphins are actually at 2-4 and they're in 2nd place in their division, and they play the division leading Bills in 3 weeks. So we have right now they have a matchup against the Colts. Next week they play the Cardinals, and they could feasibly be walking into week 10 fighting for the division lead against the Bills in that game. So we talk about like, he has to figure something out. And to me, because of the static nature of the Colts, this is a spot where it should be like, I don't want to say easiest compared to any other defensive coordinator that he's going to see to game plan around this spot because of the static nature of Gus Bradley and his cover 3 heavy defense. And we talked about the static nature. What does that mean? That means the secondary and the linebackers, there's not a lot of movement. There's not a lot of stuff going on pre-snap to confuse a quarterback, to counteract pre-snap motion, stuff like that. So to me, this is a spot where I expect Mike McDaniel to come out firing to Tyreek Hill, get him going, and he's priced at only 7,300. So before we go to the afternoon stuff, how are you seeing those 2 spots for those 2 wide receivers in particular?
Yeah, it looks like Neighbors is also dealing with some groin issues. So we have to see if he practices today by the time we get off. So that's like something else to deal with Malik Neighbors. But obviously, he's averaging 13 targets in the games he's played. We know what to do with him. Tyreek, I think, is more interesting, and I actually wrote him up in my tournament plays as well. He's tracking right now, again, grain of salt when we record this, for sub 5% ownership on both sites, and he's dipped into the 7s on both sites, which I think is appealing. And he's not someone I'm going to go wild with. I don't think he's like a jam him in guy, but I definitely want to be well above the sub 5%. I think you can definitely get creative with him if you're someone that makes a lot of lineups, to get him into maybe like a quarter of those lineups, or like even 10% and double the field, because he's had shots at big plays the 2 games with Tyler Huntley. Yeah, the first opening game against the Titans, he had basically a 75-yard walk-in touchdown Huntley overthrew, and he just missed a touchdown against the Patriots where he just didn't get his second foot down. It looked like he got it in at first, and then they reviewed it, and he wasn't in. But he has 33% and 32% of the team targets in those games. Like, it's not an issue, the volume. It's just connecting on some of these big plays. And if you were to connect on some of these big plays, it would be against this Colts defense that is giving up a lot of explosives to wide receivers. So I definitely am interested in being over the field on him, because we do have to price in, like, and I say go all in, like, he doesn't have to be a maximum exposure player, because you still have to factor in, like, he still is dealing with Tyler Huntley. He still is dealing with this. Is Mike McDaniel? Like, prove it to us, buddy.
Yeah.
Those types of things. But when a player is going to be sub 5%, you don't have to go wild on him.
Yeah, 100%. One note is Malik Neighbors got in a full practice yesterday, and beat reports out of New York were that he looked good and he looked fluid. So I don't know how much of an issue that groin is, but obviously confirmation on Friday would be lovely. All right, let's talk about these other two afternoon games. I'll leave it over to you. Do you want to talk about the Raiders and the Rams first? Do you want to talk about the Panthers and the Commies?
I know I was thinking about leaving Rams Raiders for our ugly game special, but if we want to do that, we can. I feel like that game's just going to be overlooked outside of the obvious mini that is Kyren Williams and Brock Bowers. Very clearly correlated mini stack that people are going to get to. I'm very curious to see if we get Jacoby Myers in this game, a guy that has had 40% and 26% of targets in the two games without Devontae Adams that he's played, and those were against the Browns and the Broncos. Two teams that have been really good at limiting opposing wide receiver play. Now he's going to get a game against the Rams, who have not been one of those teams. And I just think this game too offers up a lot of potential, because both these defenses are terrible. Like, the Raiders are 23rd in points allowed per drive. The Rams are 30th. It's a shot for this to get weird. Matthew Stafford is like due a bunch of regression, a bunch of touchdown regression. He has the most passing touchdowns below expectation out of any quarterback besides Geno Smith. Could be getting Cooper Kupp back to help alleviate some of that regression. He did this a year ago too. If you remember, Matthew Stafford, the front half of the year was like 30th in touchdown rate. And then like the final 7 weeks of the season, like he's hit that spike in regression and really started to throw touchdowns. And we're on a slate where Kyren Williams is probably going to be the highest rostered running back, or one of the highest rostered running backs. So you get a potential leverage play in that. And if you really want to get gross and save salary, I mean, both of those quarterbacks, Matthew Stafford and even Aiden O'Connell at 4,800, and you got Trey Tucker, another guy, is one of these guys that's priced down in a matchup. The Rams have allowed the most passing touchdowns from outside of the red zone this season. So if there were to be a spot where Trey Tucker turns one of these into something, this would be objectively one of the spots to kind of chase one of those home run balls.
Yeah, and we have a Rams defense that is giving up mad explosives. So that's a good spot for that. We have seen Tucker have some pretty stark splits against man and zone. We know this Rams defense is playing some pretty heavy rates of zone coverage. Let me get the actual number here. They are in zone at a 75.3% clip. That's 7th in the league. Is that kind of take you off at all? Or are you just looking?
No, because he's just a guy like where you're not banking on the opportunities, right? Like, you're looking to cash in like one of 6 targets, right? Like, that's kind of the type of player that you're talking about at that price range at 4,200. Where Myers is a little bit different. Like, if Myers plays and you're playing him at, I believe he's 5,400 on DraftKings, you're looking for the double-digit target run out for him at that price range.
Yeah, we have Myers that did not practice Wednesday or Thursday. So it's definitely something to keep an eye on. It'd be really, really difficult to not play Brock Bowers if Myers is out here. I really would like him to be in. And I do think that I do agree that Trey Tucker is some solid leverage if we start getting some ownership on Brock Bowers, which I don't know if we will because pricing is so tight. All right, that's a good discussion there. As far as the Rams, assuming we have Cooper Kupp back, I don't know if I think he's going to immediately step into a massive snap share route participation rate here. Does that leave any value on the table for some of these kind of deeper shots? And it sucks that we're kind of getting them priced up a little bit. Jordan Whittington, 4,800. But if Kupp is back, I expect that to eat into Jordan Whittington's snap rate. So that kind of leaves Tutu Atwell at 5K. Any interest there?
I would. It's just a lot of guesswork, right? It's a guesswork on how many snaps Kupp plays. It's also a guesswork on what they do. Because on the surface, if Sean McVay is coming out of the bye and doing self-evaluation on how this team played the opening 5 games that they played, he would probably not play Demarcus Robinson as much as he has these first 5 weeks and start to play guys like Tutu Atwell and Jordan Whittington. But that's from us. Like we have to assume he's going to do that. So that's what makes it tough, right? To kind of nibble down on these guys and say like, all right, well, maybe they come out and Kupp doesn't play like the full allotment of snaps, so I can mix in an Atwell or mix in a Whittington. Probably the safest guy to play is probably still Colby Parkinson, right? Like, and who wants to do that?
Yeah, I don't like doing that. Yeah, we have kind of a 3-year sample now of Rams tight ends that are on the field a lot, but we're just left wanting so much more. So I think Tutu Atwell is probably the strongest play because the fact that he does not play the same role as Cooper Kupp, that's Jordan Whittington. So I think Tutu shots can be taken on Tutu. His price is up at $5K, so it's kind of a tougher sell for me with him priced up there. Let's talk about the Panthers and the Commanders. My baby's crying in the background. Let's talk about the Panthers and the Commanders.
He did not like the Tutu Atwell.
Yeah, exactly. This is a spot where I don't know if we see a single punt from the Commanders. The problem is we have seen one, maybe two, like GPP viable score from a team that is top 2 in points per game. It's the Lions and then it's the Commanders. So while this is like such an amazing spot on paper, we're expecting Brian Robinson to come back. That is likely a 3-headed plus Jaden Daniels backfield at this point. I mean, they've shown a propensity to be okay to give Jeremy McNichols snaps. And this is a spot where, like, I was on Jeremy McNichols last week and it didn't pan out. I actually played him on my 555 milli roster. But this is a spot where, like, if this game gets out of hand, I expect to see McNichols kind of come in, particularly with Brian Robinson coming off of injury. So the two like GPP viable scores that came out of this team, one was week 1, Jaden Daniels, and the second one was last week with Terry McLaurin, and it took him 2 touchdowns, and he did not hit the 100-yard receiving bonus. No. And that was kind of more of a state of the slate where like no other wide receiver put up a score you absolutely had to have outside of Chris Godwin. So all of that said, like, is this a spot where you stack them up? Is this a spot where you're looking for one-offs? How are you handling the Commanders here?
It is funny because when I wrote this game up and I wrote it up from a stacking perspective, I ended up finding more angles to just go through the Carolina side and maybe bring back like the favorite Washington piece that you like, whether that be Terry McLaurin, whether that be one of the running backs, whether that be Noah Brown, right? Like any types of those. I found that to be kind of the more the cleaner avenue to get to, right? Because this Washington team it spreads the ball outside of Terry McLaurin. They still rotate in a lot of guys. Noah Brown did have a really high target per route run rate last week, but he still did only run a route on 64% of the team dropbacks. So like we do always like want a little bit more of an opportunity share than that, but he's only 4K. And he has been ahead of the other ancillary jabronis here basically anytime he's been available. So he is still in play, I think, at that price. I think what's interesting about this game, though, is it has what I look for in a game, not just the high, the high game total, 2 bad defenses, 2 good offenses, because since the Panthers have switched over Andy Dalton, they're 16th in points per drive, which matters, right? Like it's not like they're number 5, but being middle of the road instead of dead last matters in a matchup like this. Where we talk about the last game, like the Rams are 30th in points allowed per drive, but are the Raiders any good? Like, can they even take advantage of that? Like, we do know that Carolina can score against bad defenses. We've already seen it. And Andy Dalton's played it 3 games in a row since that opening game against 3 teams that are top 10 in yards allowed per pass attempt. That's not the case here. So we do expect some pushback here from this Carolina offense. I think everyone's going to be cleanly get to Chuba Hubbard naturally. I think he's one of the best plays on the entire slate from a dollar perspective. And he's the only player that has more rushing yards than him over the past month is Derrick Henry. He just keeps getting there every week. We're not going to see Jonathan Brooks. But what's cool about this game is like there are some punt options in this game. Xavier Legette is cheap. We talked about Noah Brown, and then Jalen Coker is min priced. He's actually he's 3K on DraftKings and 4,200 on FanDuel. This is a guy who's been on the field for 66% and 76% of the dropbacks the past 2 games. Has he lit up the scoreboard? No, but at a min price player, a guy that's going to be on the field against the defense that has been so bad against wide receivers as opposed to the previous 2 games. there's an opportunity here for him to have maybe like 4 for 50 and a touchdown, right? Or something like that. So he's on the board too. So there's a lot of staggering plays from a price point perspective. And I always like that when I'm thinking about playing in these small field onslaughts, like these games where like I'm looking to build like a full game stack. And if I get the game right, because you can jam Justin Jefferson in a lineup around this game with an Andy Dalton, Deontay Johnson, Jalen Coker, Chuba Hubbard team. Like pretty, you could do that.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about the Panthers, and we've been on them pretty heavily over the last 3-4 weeks since Andy Dalton took over. The last 2 weeks, this team actually came out and looked really, really good in the first half of each of those games, and then they kind of just fell flat on their face in the second half. So that tells me that Dave Canales is game planning to maximize the talent that he has on the field, and he's been struggling with the adjustments. And that kind of makes sense when you consider the defenses that he's had to adjust to. Should not be as much of a case here with the Commanders. We look at the Commanders, they have really been hiding their defense up to this point in the season because of the time of possession that they have been able to have. But if you're looking at this spot from a holistic approach, if the Panthers just can't slow them down, that should naturally lead to higher explosive plays, which now is cutting down on the Commanders' time of possession, giving the football back to the Panthers. Also, the Commanders are playing a surprisingly high rate of man coverage. They're at 35.8% now, which if we're considering Dan Quinn, that starts to make a little bit of sense. Look at his tendencies last year in Dallas. This is a guy that played man coverage at an above average rate, and now he is doing so again. That's really important in this spot because they're playing 35.8% man coverage rate. They're allowing the fourth most fantasy points per drop back in man coverage. So that's 0.70 fantasy points per drop back. This is a spot where I'm kind of circling, and it looks like we're going to get Deontay Johnson.
Yeah.
He's been dealing with this ankle injury over the last 2 weeks. He didn't practice Wednesday or Thursday, but current reports were that he was suiting up to practice on Friday. We're going to have to wait for the official report on that, but it looks like we're going to get him. We talk about Andy Dalton plus Chuba Hubbard plus Deontay Johnson. The combined salary requires this 3-person stack to average 24.4 fantasy points per player. We have seen them do that in 2 out of their 4 games together. So this is a spot where there's a lot of upside. And I think while Chuba Hubbard might grab a lot of ownership, I think the 3-person stack there, and then talk about adding like a Jake Coker, is probably going to go rather under owned. So love that shout. Drink, baby. Anything else to add from this game?
No, I think that pretty much covers it. I do wish, like you said, if you're going to go down to Jerry McHale, the bummer is that like where Austin Eckler has been priced this year, because this is also a spot where I would be interested in Austin Eckler, but he's been priced in such a spot that just makes it so hard to get him to fit into lineups.
Yeah, 100%.
He's looked great per opportunity, but he's just in that weird price zone.
Yeah. We talked about the kind of absence of value here. I think one running back is going to gain a lot of ownership based on where he's priced and the fact that Tajay Spears is expected to be out, deemed week to week with that injury. Of course, we're talking about Tony Pollard here. Tony Pollard, man, at ownership is a guy that just never sits that well with me. He's a guy playing for the Titans who
he ghosted us last week. He ran that third and 20 draw play.
3rd and 20, dude, into the end zone. I was like, are you serious? This is really happening right now? Yeah. But the matchup, dude, this is a Buffalo Bills team that is allowing the most yards allowed before contact, but the Titans are blocking to the fewest yards before contact on offense. So while the matchup looks great on paper, this is still an offensive line that is much, much better in pass protection than they are blocking for the run. So Tony Pollard is a guy that has a very clear path every week to 18 plus running back opportunities. The problem is he doesn't really have like 22 plus, 25 plus within his range of outcomes on a standard week. Does Tajay Spears' absence give him that upside here? How are you seeing that spot?
No, it's probably a second week in a row I'm not going to play him, and I hope he doesn't have a 3rd and 20 draw play on me. And it's because of the game environment, right? And because from a matchup stance, yes, it's great. Noah Oliver, the Bills have been getting absolutely shredded. They're on a short week. like all these things point to like, yes, Tajay Spears being out, it's a great opportunity, but they're also 8-point underdogs on the road. And whenever I see spots like this, I'm like, this is where you need the Titans to hang around. And if they do hang around, it's probably because Tony Pollard's been effective. But this is also, we've seen a couple of Bills games already where they're up 20 points to half.
Yeah.
Like this. And like, if that happens, Tony Pollard's toast. Like he's toast in that game environment. So I'm a little bit scared about it. I know this happened to a couple gamers that I know like were behind the scenes into James Conner last week. And I'm like, anytime I have, even if I like the player in the matchup and I see that road dog by more than, it's not tight, it's like 5 points or more, I'm always very hesitant to play those players.
Yeah, and I think the biggest kind of what's going to decide this matchup and the flow of the game environment is the fact that the Titans are ranked dead last in giveaways per game at 2.0, and the Bills rank 7th with 1.7 takeaways per game, and the Bills have turned the ball over twice this entire season. So that turnover battle and that pressure that I expect the Bills to get in the backfield is probably going to be the defining aspect of this game. So if we get Will Levis throwing 2 picks in the first half, how is that going to alter the game environment? So I like that call a good bit. And that is definitely something that the matchups, the straight matchups just don't kind of tell. And that's why we kind of want to look at the game environments. Particularly speaking, we're a guy like on the road, 8-point dogs without the backup or the 1B, we'll say, running back.
He's not getting those running backs in general, even combined, like aren't getting a lot of reception opportunities either.
Yeah, and that's also important
what
because
you would say in like a game like this, you're like, all right, well, they're 8-point dogs. He's just going to catch some dump offs, right? And we haven't been able to count on that.
That's important too, aspect of the spot, because the Bills are dead last in the league in running back receptions. They have allowed the most, we'll say that. They've allowed the most running back receptions this season. So definitely interesting aspect of that spot as well. Let's talk about a spot where I think is going to get a lot of interest from the field, and that is this Seattle and Atlanta game. We have a Seahawks team who is leading the league in pass rate over expectation, almost 41 pass attempts per game from big dog Geno Smith. That is insane. But we have an Atlanta Falcons defense that schematically, they are looking to force opponents to march the field. They are looking to limit downfield shots. And I compared this spot to some other defenses that are kind of behaving similarly. We've got the Jets, we've got the 49ers, we have the Texans, and then this Atlanta Falcons defense. They are playing almost 30% cover 4 and cover 6. So what I'm talking about there, these are all defenses that are kind of forcing teams to try and march the field, take away the downfield shots. And that's really what we're getting from this Falcons defense. So when I see that, this is a very clear path to double-digit targets for one Jackson Smith in Jigba. And we also have Tyler Lockett, who sat out practice yesterday on Thursday, and we'll have to see the injury report because he's been dealing with some stuff. But this is a new injury. He was dealing with like a hip or I forget what it was, but I think he's dealing with a knee now. So JSN, kind of this guy who has the middle of the field, is leading the league in slot snaps against a schematic matchup that is kind of pointing towards production in his way. Is this a spot where JSN goes over 100 again based on volume?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I show the Falcons on my stuff like being one of the league leaders in cover 3, actually 6th in the league. And one of the things too, you have to look back in this matchup because the Raheem Morris is no stranger to Geno Smith either. Mm-hmm. Geno, a different scheme, struggled in these matchups against Raheem Morris, where DK Metcalf actually was still really good in those matchups. And DK has been like by far the cover 3 guy, and JSN is actually last on the team below Kenneth Walker and Tyler Lockett in target rate against cover 3. So we've got some pulling forces here on the things we're looking at for sure. But I definitely believe that this is a game that, from a perspective that all the gamers are getting to, could be more of a letdown, not like a complete fantasy letdown. But the Falcons do exactly what you said, though. They're giving up like a lot of completions. They give up a high completion rate, but they don't give up a lot of high yards or pass attempt. They're not giving up a lot of passing touchdowns. It's kind of weird. Like, right, they're not giving up a lot of fantasy points either. So you know, I'm looking at like a spot like this, and I'm seeing Geno Smith being one of the most popular plays on the slate, and I'm just like, ooh, is this a kind of a trap spot? But then I look at Geno Smith too, and it's like he's due so much regression. I think I hit upon it earlier. He's dead last in the NFL in passing touchdowns from below expectation. He should have 4.6 more touchdowns than he actually has, passing touchdowns, basically on his performance, just underperforming. So it's like, when does that regression hit? When do we get that? Also, Geno has had issues with this offensive line, right? And if you're going to have offensive line issues, like this is the opponent to have them against. The Falcons do not rush the passer well. They do not attempt to rush the passer. They play very passive defense. So this would be a spot of it. They also give up a lot of rushing yards to quarterbacks because they play so much zone coverage. And it's not just that they face Jalen Hurts and Justin Fields. They also allowed 42 yards to Baker Mayfield. Last week, Andy Dalton had 21 rushing yards. That's half of a passing touchdown in fantasy football. And Geno's averaging the most rushing yards per game since his rookie season. So it's like, all right, we're gonna get a bunch of dropbacks. There's like all these pulling forces in this game, right? Like, and I'm trying to having trouble to diagnose it for sure on my end.
Yeah, and the Falcons are kind of middle of the pack in red zone defense. They're allowing a touchdown on 52.38% of opposing red zone drives. That ranks 15th in the league. One thing I forgot to mention in one of the games we talked about already was the Commanders and the Panthers. These defenses are both bottom 4 in red zone touchdown rate allowed. The Commanders 70% and the Panthers 75%. So another shout to that. Boom, drink to that game environment in the afternoon portion. But for this game, like I'm kind of seeing it a similar way to you. We look at Kirk Cousins. He had 35 pass attempts in all but one game, 35 pass attempts or fewer in all but one game this season. And that was that crazy shootout with the Buccaneers where it went to overtime and he put up like 58 pass attempts. So from like as putting myself in Zach Robinson's shoes, he hails from the Sean McVay coaching tree. This is a coaching tree that is more reactive, we'll say, as far as like in the first half, they're not looking to come out and put up as many points as possible. And if they do, they're not looking to continue that into the second half. This is a team that is very reactive in how they're handling their offense. So that tells me we need the Seahawks to kind of push the Falcons if we're looking to them for fantasy upside. So to me, this is a game stack or kind of stay away spot for me. The one exception to that is probably Jackson Smith-Njigba. He's priced at only $5,900 on DraftKings. And I think he does have a clear path to double-digit looks. So summarizing all that, game stack or JSN kind of as a potential one-off.
They were together, right? Zach, thinking about it, it didn't cross my mind until you were just talking about that. But yeah, Zach Robinson and Raheem Morris were both on that staff.
Yeah, they were. Yeah, so this is going to be a fun.
Definitely familiar. And the other element in this game too is the state of the Seattle defense. They're still missing bodies, and they have absolutely gotten smoked on the ground the past few games. And you look at because it's one thing to give up 200 yards to the 49ers run game, right?
Yeah.
But then you go back to week 5 and they couldn't stop Tyrone Tracy at all in that game. And obviously they got smoked by the Detroit backs in week 4 on that Monday night game. Like they have really struggled to stop the run. And we saw this last week with Atlanta, that if you allow them to just go downhill with Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier, they are willing to acquiesce that.
Yeah.
So that's the other element in this game too. Because I know on the surface, you look at this and you're like, you have the two of the top 5 teams in snaps per second. Like the pace for this game should be up. It's a high total. It's tight, 3 points. Should be like an auto smash spot. But there are avenues, I think, for this game to not be as fantasy fun as hopefully people are hoping for. And then it's the inverse of what we talked about a little bit with Washington. It's hard to onslaught this game because the pieces you want to play are expensive, right? Unless you're really trying to force a guy like Algier, right, who you need touchdowns from. Because Kenneth Walker's expensive, DK Metcalf's expensive, Drake London's expensive, Bijan Robinson's expensive, right? Like it's hard to really just full on attack this game.
Yeah, I'm with you there. That's kind of how I'm seeing this as well. I have a gross spot that I'll save for a few minutes from now when we start getting into the gross stuff. But I think a game that we haven't talked about that is probably going to draw some interest is the Texans and the Packers. So how are you seeing that game set up?
Yeah, it goes two ways, right? Like, because the Packers are this team, like Jordan Love just keeps doing his thing, man. Super fun player that maybe when you look at like the spreadsheets, you're like, this doesn't make sense. But when you watch him, you're like, this is super fun. Like, I love this. Like you think about his touchdown, the second touchdown to Romeo Doubs last week. Like how, like what the hell is that?
Yeah.
Like just off his back foot, throws it up, underthrown. Dobbs comes back to the ball. Like it's just so crazy, man.
And then manages to get the ball in the end zone. Yeah, that's crazy.
And because he leads the NFL in touchdown rate, and you're like, all right, well, this should come back down. But last year he was way over passing touchdowns over expectations. Like this might just be who he is. Like he might just be an outlier. And when you look at the Houston Texans, I mean, the touchdowns they allow are through the air. 12 of the 16 touchdowns scored against them have been passing touchdowns. So it kind of swerves into that. So do they get out in a lead? Because we know what Bobby Sloak wants to do.
Mm-hmm.
Listen, PFF Bobby's doing his thing. And now that he's got Mixon back, the Texans have run the ball 53% of the time when Mixon's been on the field this season. That trails only Derrick Henry, David Montgomery, and Tyler Algier for winner running backs on the field run rate. And in the 3 games he's appeared this season, Houston has a drop back rate that's 21st in the NFL, an early down drop back rate that's 24th in the NFL. And although CJ Stroud got there last week with the 3 touchdowns, his other rate stats were still down. And that's something that's been constant over the past 2 years when he's had Nico Collins and without Nico Collins, like his splits. So I worry about the Texans just being able to like, one, even wanting to be in like a game that is like up tempo and like a passing game. And then 2, even if they can really kind of get there without Nico Collins and have like this electric run out.
Last week kind of gave me a little bit of hope with Bobby Slowick. I'm going to be honest here. They had 26 first downs. They called a pass play on 14 and a run play on 12. So that is way down from the first down rush rate that we've seen over the first 5 weeks of the season. So at least that like gives me a little bit of hope.
Come on, Bobby.
We've been, God damn it, Bobby. We've been asking you to change up your tendencies here, especially on first downs for a long time. And we kind of started maybe seeing that a little bit last week. So below a 50% first down rush rate is kind of what we want to see out of Slowick, because he's been 65 to 70% over the last year and a half ish. But yeah, I'm kind of seeing the spot similar fashion as you. How are you seeing the Packers? Like, are you into Jaden Reed here with the per touch upside with all the wide receivers back and healthy? Are you going to Tucker Kraft? How are you seeing them?
Yeah, that's the toughest thing with Jordan Love, right? Is always who do you stack him with? I mean, Jaden Reed is obviously the upside guy, right? When you look at like you talk about like tournament worthy scores, like he's the guy when you're going back to last year that's able to get them. Romeo Doubs can be, but you have to just basically get multiple touchdowns out of him in those games. That's what makes it kind of tricky. I mean, obviously would just love to play Jaden Reed if he would fit our other builds, but I don't know if I'm gonna be able to get there this week because of all the other guys we talk about really wanting to play, like and kind of really being in love with in that price zone or above him this week. There's the one guy I didn't touch upon at the Texan side that I think is kind of mildly like interesting, but like not, it's very lukewarm, is Dalton Schultz. He did have a season high 8 targets last week without Nico Collins. He still hasn't had a spike week yet, but if there's a team that maybe you want to throw those targets at the wall against, it's maybe the Packers, right? Like they are 30th in receptions allowed to tight end. So maybe that's a spot where we can get him into the end zone this week. But the weird thing is just the pricing with all these pass catchers, right? Like this is a game that absolutely could be fun and shoot out. We love both quarterbacks. Like both of these quarterbacks are good players that are capable of getting this game to the high 20s each, maybe even the 30s. But then when you start to dissect like the passing trees and the price for these players versus what else the guys I really want to play on this slate, that's what makes it difficult, because the Tank Dells, the Stephon Diggs, the Jaden Reeds are all in that price zone. Like where it's like, all right, well, if you play one of these guys, it means I'm not able to run a double where I'm bringing back Amon-Ra with Justin Jefferson. It means I probably can't play Deontay Johnson, right? Like, so then those things are in play.
Yep, that's kind of how I'm seeing it as well. Let's move over to the grossest gross you will ever grossing here. I have, similar to last week with the Drake May double shout, I have some fleeting interest in Deshaun Watson doubles. It is gross. It is so gross. But you look at Deshaun Watson plus his top 2 pass catchers, the combined salary of Deshaun Watson, Jerry Jeudy, and David Njoku on DraftKings is only 13.8K. So what does that mean? Those three
Hey, add
players.
Cedric Tillman too. Go crazy.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Those three players, even if we just look at the top two options, those three players need to average 18.4 fantasy points per player to keep you on a 200-point pace. So we're talking about like the slate has no value. How do we pay up for Justin Jefferson, Amon-Ra St. Brown, potentially Malik Neighbors? How do we get Kyron Williams in there? This might be a spot where I have some fleeting interest, and I might run this out. I'll probably build 4 to 10 rosters again this week. I might have this 3-man stack in 1 or 2 of them. Thoughts on that against the Bengals?
I mean, listen, it makes sense. It does. From just like if you can divorce yourself from everything that we've seen from this offense at this point, and maybe things just get a little bit better with Nick Chubb coming back, right? Maybe they're just a little more balanced. Maybe they're able to play ahead of the sticks a little better than they have, because the Browns are dead last in set of downs to reach third down right now in the NFL. So maybe if they're dead last in the NFL in early down performance. So maybe if getting Nick Chubb is coming back can just help them a little bit in that regard. It gives you maybe the spot. Because like you said, you're playing these guys. You're not looking for to just get home. You're looking to fill your roster out with the rest of the guys you expect to get home. And there's an avenue here where, obviously the way the Bengals have played offense outside of Sunday night, they can score points. Also, the one element too that Deshaun Watson still has that is always in his back pocket still is the mobility. And the Cincinnati Bengals have allowed a ton of rushing yards to quarterbacks this year. Now, even outside of playing Lamar Jackson, Daniel Jones, 39 rushing yards, or Jaden Daniels, 39 rushing yards, Daniel Jones, 56. Jacoby Brissett had 32 yards against them on the ground. Patrick Mahomes, 29. So there's a shot where Deshaun Watson runs for a passing touchdown in this game for fantasy football. So you also have that in play as well. And Njoku looks like a prime play anyways, at his price point. And then you're just hoping Jerry Jeudy absorbs kind of what Amari Cooper leaves behind. I imagine Cedric Tillman, like I said, will play a lot of the snaps when they go 3 wide. But also with getting Nick Chubb back, do they reduce because you have 2 things, getting Nick Chubb back plus the trade of Amari Cooper. Does that pull them back from playing 11 personnel as much as they have to this point? So I won't get cute with Cedric Tillman, but I do expect when they go 11 wide or 11 personnel to him be the outside receiver and Elijah Moore still to be in the slot. So, I mean, listen, it is ugly. It's gross, but there's a reason we talk about these things.
Yes, because it gets you all the other fun stuff. Like only 13.4 in salary for a 3-player block. You're placing 1 bet on getting 3 pieces of the roster right. So that's why this kind of stuff has merit. But yeah, it's go back to this. I just threw up a little in my mouth saying it as well. But you mentioned if Deshaun Watson gets 30 yards rushing, that's 3 points. We're looking for him to hit 18.4 to keep us on a 4x salary multiplier. So he needs 200 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. Is that within his range of outcomes? I think 100% it is this week.
And I'm definitely not ready to say the Bengals defense is back after Sunday night either. Game against the Giants at home where they've struggled with no Malik Neighbors. I'm definitely not ready to say Big Lou's got this ship headed in the right direction.
Yeah, and Lou Anarumo is a good defensive coordinator, but he's overcoming a lot. They lost both safeties coming into the season. They've had a lot of personnel turnover. This is just a gross spot, and that's why we talk about it. It's gross, but it could get us there. There was a lot. Are you
bringing anyone back with that, or are you just interested for that double to get you to Kyron, Justin Jefferson?
Yeah, I'm not. Similar way, I did not bring back anybody with the Patriots, with the Drake May double with Demario Douglas and Hunter Henry. You're just looking for this offense to score 2 touchdowns, and you need them to come through Deshaun Watson in some fashion.
I like it.
The Patriots put up 21 points for the first time all season last week. So that was nice. And again, it's just a function of the tight pricing, the slate, wanting to get up to Justin Jefferson, Amon-Ra, Neighbors, some of these guys that are tough to fit in. All right, that was my vomit inducing. Do you got one for me, dude?
No, I mean, that was basically, I definitely can't beat that either. I can't one up that. But,
Yeah.
like my other one was the Raiders doubles, right? It was the same,
Yeah.
in the same vein that you were saying, like, Aiden O'Connell plus Brock Bowers plus Jacoby Myers, right? Like those guys being able to, average like a little over 20 points per game is definitely in the range of outcomes as well. Not quite as vomit inducing as that, but they were my gross one.
Yeah, that's an upset tummy.
Did you see that stat? I'm actually mad that it was such a good stat that I didn't have it, but it was Aiden O'Connell has never scrambled on an NFL dropback yet.
No,
He's got
that's
0
hilarious.
scrambles. It's the most hilarious thing I ever seen.
That is hilarious.
He's got 0 scrambles.
he just eats it. Oh man. All right, we're at
That's
out the
actually
door.
opposite, Michael. The Brock Bowers thing is absolutely 100% the inverse of how you're laying it out. His man coverage stuff is actually not good, and his target rate per cover, his target rate. Because I actually brought this up a couple weeks ago when they played the Browns when Devontae Adams first left. I could pull up. He's actually like shredding zone coverage. I could pull up the splits too, but his target rate against zone coverage is absolutely seismic versus his man coverage stuff.
100% with you there. Out the door, man. The last 5 minutes we reserve for your out the door plays. These can be just something that nobody is looking at. What do you got for us this week?
I was gonna bring up Tyreek Hill as kind of that.
Oh, my bad.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's fine. It's all good. Definitely still a spot. We talked about a lot of expensive wide receivers, but one we didn't talk to at that point. So I do have it right here. So right now, Brock Bowers against zone coverage has been targeted on 31.5% of his routes. It's the highest rate for any tight end in the NFL. Against man coverage, it's 13.5%. So it almost triple. And you compare that to some other guys that are like good tight ends, like George Kittle's at 24% and 20. Trey McBride is at 28% and 20%. Jake Ferguson's at 24% and 20%, like a lot more even, than those other guys as well. So definitely it's the inverse of how you laid it out. It would be if you're facing a heavy zone team like the Rams, and also the Rams allowing the most yards per target to tight ends.
Yeah. It's a good spot. It's a good spot.
Of all the expensive wide receivers we talked about, one guy not to get lost in the sauce again that I played a lot of last week that got me there that I don't want to ignore is AJ Brown. Good guy, Arthur Juan. He's played 2 games this year. He has 34.5% of the targets and 37.5% of the targets. Giants are not playing as much man coverage as the Cleveland Browns were last week, but they are 10th in the league in rate of cover 1. So anytime we get, ISO, AJ Brown, like you saw them to ice the game. How about them keeping us, our dear fantasy players, in their hearts and getting him that 40-yard reception to run out the clock, to get him over the 100-yard bonus as well. We love to see it. Nick Sirianni's largely a goober, but he got us that 100 yards.
Also noteworthy in that spot, I love this shout, is while the Giants are playing fewer man coverage snaps, they're allowing the most fantasy points per dropback from man coverage. So they're in man at 27.2%. They're allowing 0.81 fantasy points per dropback while in man coverage, and that is worst in the league. So yeah, AJ Brown, man coverage, good things can happen. Anything else to add, man? This was a fun episode.
No, yeah, super. I think it's a super fun slate. I think it's gonna be really interesting. I think the afternoon games, especially. I will tell everyone, if you're chasing points, do not just look at. You're gonna have to go to like Rams, Raiders. You're gonna have to go to maybe Travis Kelce, right, or like someone else in that Chiefs game, because I mean these Panthers guys look like they're gonna be really popular.
Yes, we're gonna get a lot of ownership, I think, from the afternoon portion. So don't be counting your chickens until we get at least a halftime, and then we can start sweating of the afternoon slate. As always, I am Hilow. He is Rich. Head on over to 1 Week Season, get signed up for Inner Circle, get you access to all the good DFS theoretical stuff that we're talking about over there. Head on over to sharpfootballanalysis.com. Use code TAKE25 for 25% off anything they got going on over there, and that'll get you access to all of Rich's great work. Until next week, y'all, we'll see you at the top of the leaderboards. Peace.
1 Week Season.